Ian Golden, who always starts his talks by saying, you know, take stock of where you are today, because today is the slowest day of the rest of our lives. And I think that's actually a really great quote that captures the sentiment of how quickly and at an unprecedented pace and scale, technology is upending and restructuring labor markets. Innovation gives rise to technology, but technology also drives innovation. And as I said, one of the fundamental components to building an equitable society is harnessing the productive potential of women. So the first question I would ask, Amita, is, you know, who has access to this technologically driven economy? And I would say that access is first about ownership. And if we just look at some of the data, you know, 80% of women in low and middle income countries own a mobile phone. Now that sounds like a really big number, but there's huge variation across countries. So in India, for example, where I'm based, only 46% of women actually own mobile phones. So 1 out of 2 women do not own mobile phones. And the ones that own smartphones is even lower. So in India, for example, only 24% of those that actually own mobile phones own smartphones. Now we know that mobiles and cell phones are the primary means that women use to access the internet. So even though this access is increasing very, very quickly in some parts of the world, in some low and middle income countries, it's still quite low. So, you know, that's one aspect of disparity. The second is just the gender gap between men that own technology and men that have internet access, and women that own technology and women that have access. Women are 10% less likely than men to own a cell phone, and they're 23% less likely to use mobile internet. So, you know, the first question about access, we clearly see that we still have some ways to go. The second question that I would raise is not just about, you know, do women have access to the technology and to internet, but also do they have the requisite levels of education, digital skills, and training to be able to participate in an economy that is technologically driven. And here we know there's a lot of research that shows that technology is skill biased. You need to have a certain degree of skill to be able to you know, participate in a technologically driven economy. And here again, we find huge disparities, right? So we've all heard about the fact that women are grossly underrepresented in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, for example. On average, only 30% of the world's researchers are women. And this number, again, there's huge variation across countries. So if we take India, for example, it's only 15% that are of women that are researchers, and the number goes to single digits in Nepal. Only 3% of students that join ICT courses, that's information communication technology courses, are women. 5% if we look at mathematics and statistics, and 8% for engineering, manufacturing, and construction. So from the very beginning, if we say that innovation leads to technology and technology facilitates innovation, women stand to lose out on both these fronts, not just because we still have a ways to go to guarantee the kind of access that women need in order to be able to participate in the economy, but also there's a huge gender disparity. And I think these are all factors worth noting at the beginning of this dialogue. And then of course, we can get into what needs to happen in order to be able to address these kinds of disparities, but I'll pause there.
Great, thank you, Savina. It's quite, you know, talking about International Women's Day, and we are saying that we are 250 years away from really creating a more gender equal world. And the picture that you have just painted right now on innovation, technology, and gender is clearly showing that, there's a big disparity that we need to bridge. And so I am going to come back to you, circle back to you, to say, what do we need to do in order to really sort of bridge that gap? But what I will do now is to move to the Benjamin Mackay, if he's online, to the next question. Benjamin is Senior Manager for Technology for Development, Safaricom, which is Kenya's leading mobile and telecommunications operator. I really liked what Safaricom says is its purpose. They talk about transforming lives and leaving no one behind. So Benjamin, welcome. I'm glad you were able to get in to the call. Could you share with the audience a little bit more about yourself, and also tell us how is Safaricom developing innovations and technologies to advance gender equality and inclusion?
Thank you very much. I'm the only one whom you can't see the face because I'm on the road, but I've just parked to check this particular call. Thank you so much for having Safaricom on this particular call. I'll just start by briefly explaining to you what Safaricom is all about and what we believe in. And I mean, as a telco company, why are we interested in gender and in innovation? I'll also start by saying Happy International Women's Day to all of you and all the women who are doing great work in this planet of ours. So basically what I do is I lead a unit called Technology for Development, which sits within the Corporate Affairs Division of Safaricom. And our main role is more of like incubate ideas. We work with like-minded organizations to think through pressing issues within the society and try to find the solutions. And basically what we are trying to do is to see how we can leverage on mobile technology. I mean, mobile technology cuts across all geographies, and mobile technology, especially in the context of a country like Kenya, is the only technology which you find virtually everywhere. I mean, every homestead could be having a mobile phone, whereas you might not find basic necessities or other amenities like toilets, water in most of those households. So we ourselves as a business, we made a deliberate decision that we can leverage on this particular tool to transform lives of Kenyans in general and our subscribers. So as an organization, we celebrate the contribution and role of every woman in our society. And actually quoting what our CEO said just the other day, it's, for us, it is also a time to call for change and acknowledge that there is still more to be done as we work to close the inequality gap. So Safaricom believes that the struggle for equality is not only women's issue or other women's issue, but a human rights issue. We really strive towards reducing the inequalities across the board. So far, as an organization, we've been able to achieve like 50-50 gender parity across our staff outside the senior management. The senior management currently stands at 34%, and I mean, it's something we are striving towards sort of like increasing it to 50% over time. But basically, when it comes to innovation, how do we sort of like ensure that there is some components of gender parity as far as the whole thing is concerned? It's all about the programs which we put into our processes. And it's not mainly about the product which we can take to the market, but it's more about how we empower the women and the people we work with. We support women businesses, and we will always continue to do that. And by doing so, we aim to ensure that women are thriving, innovating, and basically we are trying to ensure that those initiatives such as women in business, women in technology, and women in leadership are programs which are embedded within the strategy of Safaricom as an organization. So you realize that most of the partners we work with, as I said, our units works with like-minded organizations. Actually, majority of them are women-led. And what we do is to embrace a shared value model when we are thinking of the solutions we are developing, be it in agriculture, be it in education. And you find that Safaricom goes out of, we don't know whether to define ourselves as a telco company today, because you find us in health, you find us in agriculture, besides the core mobile services. The core mobile services which we are known for, SMSs, USSD, mobile money, that is the globally recognized M-Pesa. But we've always been able to ask ourselves, besides that, what else can we do? Can we do something in health whereby we can help mothers be able to adhere to the mandatory antenatal care visits? Are we able to do something in agriculture where we can help smallholder farmers, of whom majority of them are women, be able to produce enough for their own consumption, and also be able to have quality produce which can also be taken to market. So we are trying to help them get out of subsistence farming to sort of like create enterprises which generate revenue. So why do we do so? We looked at the Sustainable Development Goals as an organization, and the question we asked ourselves is, what can the goals do for us as a business? And the decision we made is that we can mine opportunities which are brought to us by the Sustainable Development Goals by leveraging on technology to develop solutions which address those specific indicators in those specific goals. So in a nutshell, that's what really brings Safaricom into this particular space of gender inclusivity and innovation.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. It's very inspiring to know that Safaricom is aligning itself, and it's the mission to United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And what you said about, looking at the gender lens in very different sectors. You said you're not just a telecoms company. You don't know whether you should be just describing yourself as a telecom company, because you're also sort of looking at other sectors and looking at the gender lens within that. I think that's a good segue for me to move to Alexandra Tyers. Alexandra is the director for Tyers Consulting, and she's a gender and innovation technical specialist. I was quite fascinated to read Alexandra's resume, actually. Alexandra has done work in the air at the nexus of gender, innovation, and technology in all the different jobs that she's done, and she's got quite a diverse background. So, Alexandra, what I'd love to know from you is what is some of the work that you've been doing, whether it's UNICEF or with Tyers Consulting? What is some of the work that you've been doing in the area of gender, innovation, and technology?
Sure, thanks, Amita. Thank you very much for the introduction, and so nice to be invited on this call and be amongst the other esteemed panelists. Thank you for the introduction. Just a bit of background about myself. As Amita said, I'm a gender and tech specialist, or an enthusiast, shall we say. I'm enthusiastic about gender and innovation. I'm enthusiastic about gender and tech in particular, and I'm enthusiastic about the gender digital divide. So what I have done, or what my work involves, is designing digital products and solutions for women and girls specifically. And I've mostly done this in Africa and Asian markets, but some work in the Pacific too. I have also worked on digital products with a gender lens, so not just for women, but making sure they include women. And I'm also a gender digital divide researcher, so I was beyond thrilled to hear some of Sabina's stats, because that's some of the work I've done. So I'm really pleased that it's out there and the stats are getting out there, we're having these sort of conversations. As Amita said, I'm a director of a couple of companies, but previously I have worked with GSMA Connected Women. I've been working with UNICEF in the past 2 years. I've been working with UNCDF on digital finance for women, USAID, and several mobile operators on commercial and non-commercial mobile products. So the kind of things I've been doing, and I'll keep it quite brief because I could talk for hours. I have been designing, or I've been working in Bangladesh for many years, building edtech solutions for women and girls specifically adolescent girls in rural areas, working with a mobile operator and an NGO to reach adolescent girls to improve their English and ICT skills. And that was through voice and SMS. So that's one thing I have been working on. I've been doing a lot of stuff recently on digital skills for girls. As Sabina rightly pointed out, one of the big barriers and the reasons for that gender gap in access and use in technology is the digital skills. And so I've been working downstream, girls under 18, to deliver digital skills training and digital literacy skills, but also confidence. So I've been doing that with UNICEF in about 5 countries, working with the French fashion house Chloe as well. I have been working on digital health solutions in Bangladesh and Rwanda and Tanzania, but one of the last few years. But one of the things I really want to talk about, because it has consumed my life for the last year, and it's taught me so much, even though I thought I knew quite a lot, it's taught me so much more about designing digital products and services for women. So in the last year, I've been working with UNICEF in particular in their gender and innovation team. And I have been the product manager for a period tracker, menstruation tracker, for adolescent girls. So the app is called Oki, and it was launched in December. So if you have an Android phone, please do download it. I am actively looking for feedback, but yes, so we launched it in December. And it's an Android app to support adolescent girls to manage their periods with confidence and to make their periods normal. There's so much stigma around menstruation, there's so much stigma around talking about periods, and there's so much shame about it. And so this app was designed to break through those taboos in contexts where menstruation is taboo. So we've launched it in Mongolia and Indonesia as our pilot markets. And this year we're scaling in Kenya, Bangladesh, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and a couple of others. And so the pilot one went live in December. What it is a way of girls learning about periods and menstruation in fun ways, and a way to distinguish myths and facts and promoting positive attitudes towards menstruation. There's so much disinformation out there. There's so many myths. So it's a way of actually getting evidence-based information into the hands of girls and the tools they use absolutely every single day, their mobiles. I just want to talk a little bit about it, because as we go on in the session, I would like to talk about some of the principles behind it for designing for girls. So I just want to give you a background of it. It's actually the first period tracker app designed for girls, aged 10 to 19. It's gamified. It uses avatars and a personalized interface, and it's very period positive, it's very body positive. It uses girl-friendly language to give information in very entertaining ways. And it's all about challenging gender stereotypes, all about challenging stereotypes about menstruation and taboos. And it's also localized in Mongolian, and it's localized in Bahasa in Indonesia, and coming soon in the new markets, it will be localized and in local languages as well. But, you know, again, sorry to Sabina to build on this because I think it's so important, but one of the things you rightly said was that huge gap in access and use for women and girls. There's a lot less information about girls under the age of 18, but one of the things what you need to do when you design for women and girls is really think about their digital realities. And so Oki is built for girls' digital realities. It's a lightweight app for low-end phones. It does run on smartphones. That's because it's a predictive algorithm. There's no way around that. But it is offline. So the moment girls download the app, they never have to go online again for that gap in internet access. We know that girls share phones. We know that girls share phones with their brothers, their fathers, or other girls. And so it has multiple user login and password protection for that sort of situation. It also has extremely high data privacy. A lot of the commercial period tracker apps out there have had data breaches, which you may have read about in the news. It's been quite a big topic, menstrual surveillance. And so one of the things about this app is it has extremely high standards of data privacy and protection, because that's what girls told us they wanted. They wanted to be sure that their personal data would always be private to them and no one else would ever have access. It is also open source. And so we envision a kind of community of gender and innovation specialists and gender and tech specialists and girls themselves co-creating and working on this app and working on the content. So it's very kind of user-centered. And so if anyone is interested in that as well, you know, feel free to reach out to me. It is open source code, it's open source branding, and it's open source content management systems as well. I will stop there because I could talk about my app for ages, but I will build on it a little bit later when we talk about some of the things to keep in mind when designing digital products and services, either for women and girls or with a gender lens.
That was great, Alexandra. Thank you so much. And you know, Sabina started with articulating what the issue is around access and use of technology for women, especially in the 21st century. That's a gap. And it's great to see that you are actually developing some of the digital products and services. And what I particularly liked was that it's being co-created with the tech specialists and the women to make sure that it's really fit for purpose and very consumer centric. So that's great to know. So now I will move on to Quena Mabocha. Quena Mabocha is the SAP Next Gen Director for the Africa region, and she's also the regional leader for Global Gender Agenda. Quena, welcome. It would be great if you could tell us a little bit more about your role linked to the UN SDGs and gender in particular, and also if you can share how is SAP Next Gen ensuring that women are not left behind in the digital divide? What lessons can the other organizations take from your experience?
Thank you so much, Amita. And hello, it's morning on my side. So good morning to everyone. Happy International Women's Day. I'm so happy to be part of this illustrious panel and to share, ideas around gender and innovation and the impact thereof. So yes, I work for SAP. SAP is a technology company. We're one of the largest technology companies in the world. Just to give you a glimpse on kind of the reach that SAP has. One interesting statistic is that globally, at some point, the world's 75% of the world's revenue has gone through an SAP system at some point. So if you think about that within the context of software, what we do as a company is we design enterprise software that helps organizations to manage their business processes, but also to bring in new technologies such as artificial intelligence, etc., to help organizations to draw meaningful insight using very sophisticated analytics in terms of making decisions regarding their businesses. So we are a global tech company. We have a far-reaching global footprint and ecosystem, which consists of the largest companies across the world, whether they be our customers or our partners. We have this really large ecosystem. And the reason why I'm actually mentioning this ecosystem is because, as an organization, SAP, as part of our DNA, is to be purpose-driven. So, of course, we are a for-profit organization, but we also believe that there's an impact that we can make in society. And recently in Davos, we actually announced, together with Accenture and with Global Compact, a new initiative around accelerating the business ambition towards achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We know that we have 10 years left to achieve the goals. And, we believe strongly that as business, there's a big role that we can play in terms of accelerating towards those goals. So we have partnered with Accenture, with UN Global Compact, to create a framework that can really say to organizations, let's challenge you to raise your ambition in terms of your day-to-day business, your strategy, how you incorporate the SDGs within that so that we can move quickly together towards achieving the goals within the next 10 years. And that's really also kicking off the decade of action, right? So the reason why I mentioned that ecosystem is because as SAP, we have a role to play in terms of walking that journey with this entire ecosystem of business players. That can all come together and say and ask ourselves, let us look at our day-to-day business, how we conduct business, and utilize a framework to allow us to move towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's just a little bit of background in terms of the relationship that we have with the Global Compact, but also how as an organization we see our role in terms of furthering the Sustainable Development Goals. In terms of the Next Gen program, this is really a very unique program that we've built as SAP to really go out there and engage in a meaningful way through a partnership model, also looking at the objective of innovation with purpose, right? So through the Next Gen platform, we really go out there and partner with different organizations, different stakeholder groups, such as the UN World Economic Forum. We partner with academic institutions, we partner with startups, we partner with incubators and accelerators to create this co-creation innovation with purpose. And I'm so happy to hear from the rest of the panel that already some of this work is happening in other sectors. But we really come together to foster innovation with purpose. And of course, if we look at the topic of gender equality, very much central for that, because we believe that by tackling gender equality, you can actually look at so many of the other sustainable development goals and impact those, right? Such as if we have more women that are economically active, you're reducing poverty, it's better education, it's inclusion. So there are so many different um, SDGs that are touched on by improving gender equality. And that's why this topic is very much core, not only to the Next Gen program, but to SAP overall in terms of our commitment that we've made to the SDGs. So in terms of some of the initiatives that we're running to close the gap, obviously I've mentioned, the partnership model. This is something that we rely strongly on because we believe, it's that old African adage that if you want to go fast, you go alone, but if you want to go far, you go together, right? And my personal belief is that, and what I've seen is that by partnering closely with like-minded organizations where we all understand the objective, we have a similar objective, and are bringing an investment in terms of the unique. So a few examples of the initiatives that we're running, for example, we spoke about the gap in terms of digital skills. This is something that we concentrate quite actively on as SAP. So we tend to look at, the entire pipeline of talent where, we start at the very young age where that inspiration and spark and exposure needs to happen to garner the interest of your young girls and as participating, particularly into the tech world. So for example, in that sector of learners, girls, we run a program called Africa Code Week, which is really focused on planting the initial seeds in terms of exposing learners to technology, to coding skills. And through this program, where we've partnered with organizations like UNICEF, Google, etc., we have trained over the last year 2.3 million participants. And that's kind of the average that we've had over the last 5 years, which is quite a big number and scale, right? And of that, more than 50%, we actually target girls to spark that initial interest, to change the perception, because there's an ongoing perception that, STEM and tech is something that the boys do. So through Africa Code Week, we really create a platform where we partner with large organizations, but also with very much community-based organizations at the grassroots level to provide infrastructure, to provide access to content and digital skills that can spark the initial interest. So that's the program we run there. And then moving on into the academic world, universities, through our University Alliances program, we leverage our big network of academic institutions to work with them to bridge the gap and allow for industry-related curriculum to be included. So whilst as a student you are getting your foundation, we provide the platform to actually give you what's happening in the industry so that you're getting a combination of both, because sadly the reality is that at the moment academic institutions do struggle to keep up with the pace of technological advancement. So we've said, let us partner to empower universities to do that. Over the last 3 years, we have a flagship program in Africa called Enterprise Systems Education for Africa, where we've currently trained over 5,000 students over the last 3 years. And of that, we actively target female students. And to add to that, how we are actually building this network for female students, we also, for example, create what we call equality lounges, which is a partnership with an organization called the Female Quotient. Equality lounges are basically a physical space on campuses, in incubation and accelerators, to signify that this is the home of equality. And it's a space that is used to attract the conversation around gender equality within innovation spaces, within academic institutions, and to really bring in our ecosystem in terms of interacting with young girls, interacting with startups, interacting with students, to really inspire, as well as provide opportunities for women to further along their careers within the STEM field, addressing really, that 30% that is so pervasive across all the different areas of STEM. And then, of course, once you've graduated, we run a program there as well, also around digital skills, but also around job creation, given the fact that in Africa, for example, we face such a high level of youth unemployment, which we have further gaps in terms of women. We run a program where we provide free certification, SAP certification to students, graduates, and then we place them within our ecosystem, that large ecosystem that I talked about the largest customers and partners who are needing the talent. We create that mechanism that connects the pieces. And within that program as well, a very big focus on having more than 50% representation of women to ensure that we have financial inclusion. So those are some of the external programs that we run. We also, of course, do run our own internal programs as SAP, because we also believe that diversity is very important in terms of driving our businesses. So, I mean, Deloitte says diverse companies are 20% more innovative, right? So in order to stay relevant, profitable, we also believe that obviously diversity is an important function. But yeah, I just wanted to focus more on our external programs. And in terms of key takeaways there, I think, the numbers I've mentioned are quite big. So we like to operate at scale very quickly. And I think a key takeaway there is in the way that we've been able to leverage the partnerships that we have. And I think that partnerships are very key and central towards really moving towards closing the gap. If we are to make it in the next 10 years, if we go as business as usual, Amita, as you've mentioned, 250 years, right now is if we go as business as usual, it will take us 250 years to achieve the goal, right? So we're saying by going together with partners, this is really helping us to accelerate, and we'd love to see more of that happening. And that's basically why as a company we really dedicate ourselves to bringing our entire ecosystem on this decade of action to move quickly and together towards closing the gaps.
Fantastic, Veena. Really great. Really great to actually hear from you the work, the commitment of SAP, and the sort of real diverse array of work that SAP is doing, whether it's internal, external, through partnerships, or setting up symbols, a symbolic sort of areas such as equality lounges in order to facilitate conversation and accelerate action on gender equality. So really great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to circle back, Sabina, to you and to the specific comments that you made around, there is a skills gap, there is a ownership and access gap for women to participate in the 21st century. So I would like to understand from you, what is your organization doing to address some of those gaps? And also, gig economy is one of the big opportunities, they say, for perhaps women. Do you see that there is an opportunity for women to play a greater role in the gig economy?
Great. Thank you, Amita. It really is great to hear from these strong and accomplished women that are doing such excellent work to address the gender gap. I also wanted to congratulate both Unilever and Safaricom for achieving gender parity in terms of staffing. So that's really fantastic. And hopefully, other companies and private sector players will also follow suit, not just private sector, public sector as well. I wanted to underscore and add a little bit to something that really resonated me from what Benjamin said. He said that gender parity and women's rights is also about human rights. And I absolutely agree with that and want to underscore that. But in addition to that, I think we also need to really emphasize the fact that gender equality and gender parity is a matter of economics as well, that this is an economic imperative. We cannot continue to have economic systems where 50% of women, roughly, 50% of the workforce, 50% of the population's productive potential is completely lost or not harnessed appropriately, right? On the one hand, we talk about growth, but on the other hand, we're perfectly fine going on with these systems that are highly unequal. So I just wanted to underscore the fact that it's also an economic imperative. Now, the question about how my organization and our work, how we sort of address some of these issues. So as I started by saying, we are an applied research organization. And the word applied here is very important because we work also with a lot of multilateral organizations like UNICEF, ILO, UN Women, and a variety of others. We also work with businesses, governments, as well as grassroots organizations. And our job is to provide them with the information that they need to do their jobs better and to ensure that job creation and the quality of jobs is what we need to have successful, inclusive economic growth and successful economies. And again, So what we do, one big component of that is, of course, gender equality. So we ensure that when a government makes policies, we review what actually works for women and what needs to happen in order to facilitate better participation of women in labor markets. When we're talking about companies that are doing skilling, we talk to them about what kinds of accommodations women might need in order to be able to be active in their companies or on their shop floors or in their factories. When we work with grassroots organizations, we address, a different set of issues about community engagement and about potentially working with families to kind of change the mindset. So that's kind of what Just Jobs does. But I wanted to emphasize in terms of, the fact that we are seeing progress in terms of gender parity, but not fast enough. We still have problems with access to technology, problems with access to the internet, problems in terms of accessing digital skills and digital education. But given the number of different kinds of stakeholders and players my organization works with, one of the big recognitions that we have is the fact that we can sort of address the patterns that we see. We can sort of work from these trends that we see, but until we actually put in the time, the energy, and the money to fundamentally change the mindsets of communities that still hold women back, it's going to be really difficult to bring about tangible change. Now, what do I mean by that? I live in a country that on the one hand has this image of an emerging market economy, which until recently had fairly high levels of growth consistently. And on the other hand is still mired in all kinds of patriarchy, right? And I think when we talk about removing barriers for women, I think we cannot really make progress as quickly or as big progress as we would like unless we address the fact that a lot of women aren't even allowed to leave their homes in order to be able to access training, right? I think the issue of safety in transport, safety in areas, those are all sort of ancillary policies and concerns that we need to actually look at comprehensively to create an ecosystem that is conducive to harnessing the productive potential of women. And it starts with donors, governments, players sort of acting on this issue of mindset change. And I think the work that Alexandra is doing is so important in this context, because the issue that you're dealing with menstruation and, people don't necessarily connect that right away to economic empowerment and to jobs and to, confidence, but it is, it is about a mindset change. And so that's, I think, a fantastic example. So, I think that's number one, is that removing barriers isn't just about addressing patterns, but it's also about making the sort of community changes that we need. And in this context, I also think that Quena's work with the lounges is so important, because that's, again, also talking about community engagement and not just dealing with the patterns and the numbers, but actually getting to the underlying root causes of some of the gender disparities we see. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll stop, is, I think I talked about access to digital skills, and I talked about sort of, I mentioned kind of the importance of transferable skills and lifelong learning. But I also think that all of this has to be built on a strong foundation of requisite levels of education, which still in many parts of the world, we have, 98, 99% enrollment of women in schools, absolutely. But if the quality of education is low, then, digital skills will only take you so far in a technologically driven economy, right? So we cannot compromise the fact that women not only just need sort of the enrollment box ticked, but also actually we need to cultivate good quality education that really in a real way allows women to participate in a technological driven economy. And that comes with this idea that it's not just enough to sort of say, okay, we just want women to enter the labor market or provide them with home-based options for work, which the gig economy provides, but also to allow women to have economic mobility, right? Not every woman should feel like she doesn't have a choice to actually go from cooking at home and using some kind of a gig-based delivery service to cater, but that she actually has the option of leaving her house and eventually opening a restaurant, right? So these choices, this kind of mobility is very important. And it's not just important for us to say, okay, these are the numbers and now we've got them because we've put women into jobs or more women are economically active from home, but we're actually linking it to this idea of women being at par with men, having the freedom to leave their homes, having the economic mobility to progress and start their own businesses outside of their homes. And what do those ladders look like? Thank you.
Oh, that was great, Sabina. That was very insightful. Thank you very much. And absolutely right. You know, you need economic mobility, but you need to have the requisite levels of education. And really, like you said, the fundamental is the mindset. And only when we are able to achieve that level of equal mindset is that we will be able to accelerate progress, which is a good segue for me to go to Benjamin and ask him the question around Benjamin, you talked about the work that you're doing, and it's very inspiring in the area of how you're looking at the gender lens for so many different things. Could you please describe how you're really integrating this as a, SDG 5 in particular, into your operations, strategies, and innovation processes? What internal changes have you had to make, both the hard stuff, but also the soft stuff, like the mindsets that you've had to shift as to sort of really integrate this into the business strategy?
Sure. Thank you very much. So what I would say is that when Safaricom embraced the idea of sustainable goal, actually, whatever was guiding us is that we believe as an organization that when we come together, great things happen. And one of the goals actually, which was really instrumental in this, was goal number 17, which is partnership. So since then, we've moved on, and what we believe in as an organization is that we need to be simple, honest, and transparent for our customers. And that's why we say simple, honest, transparent for you. As I had earlier said, as a business, we looked at what opportunities are there as far as the sustainable development goals are concerned. And one of my colleagues who leads the entrenchment, or rather implementation of SDGs within the organization, they took some time to understand what is the strategy of Safaricom as a company, and how can we embed the sustainable development goals within our strategic approach as an organization. So we aim to choose a number of goals. I mean, looking at the goals, they are all about around 17 of them, but we picked 9 of them, and each particular goal, we tied it to some of the key things we believed in: customer first, relevant products and services, and the operational excellence. Now, when it comes to issues to do with sustainable development, goal number 5, which has a component of gender, and then number 9, which has some elements or other elements of innovation. Those are goals which prompted us to sort of like think, how can we innovate around the processes pertaining women working for us and women who are our partners as well. And it's through that Safaricom has always embraced programs which I had earlier mentioned, like Women in Technology, whereby they go out there to encourage women to pursue technology-related initiatives and encourage young women, and ensure that they all sort of like join programs which are technology-oriented. So out of that, some of them have been able to take careers in technology, engineering, which predominantly were men, or rather, majority of the people you would find in those careers were men. Then women in leadership, it's all about having a shoulder to lean on. I mean, women are able to mentor each other. They are able to be encouraged to that you can also play a great role, and not only can, but you're also playing a great role as far as leadership is concerned. That's why I was saying that gender parity in Safaricom is at 50-50 at the moment, 34 as far as senior leadership is concerned, and the business is making some progress towards making sure that we are going to 40-50 eventually. And then women in business, I mean, the majority of women in business are our dealers, and some of them are partnering with us in other programs and even in product development. So it's all about how we empathize with some of the things women are working on, and looking at how technology can be at the center stage. Because by the end of it, what we do as an organization is to empathize with our customers and come up with products which are relevant to their day-to-day needs. And that's the quest of a unit like technology for development, ensuring that the solutions which we are coming up with addresses most of those issues. And as we do so, we are not just doing that philanthropically, we are doing that wearing the lens of a business or a company, which is a company which is sensitive to the needs of our subscribers, and also sensitive to the environment which we operate in, because we are looking at it when women are empowered, women are able to use our products and services. And if Safaricom has to be there for the next 100 years, these women are the ones who are going to walk the journey together with Safaricom. So that's our approach. And just to sort of like bring a different dimension altogether, we believe in reputation first before the revenues. And out of that, we also embrace the fact that when you are a purpose-driven organization, when you have the right mix of people, we usually call them the 3 Ps, whereby purpose comes first, then we have people. The people could be our members of staff, could be our partners. Ultimately, you'll be able to make some profit out of it. So as we innovate across the value chain, across all the areas which we focus on as an organization, we really embrace the 3 Ps. So purpose, people, and then ultimately the solutions you're going to come up with will be able to make some profit for us. They will be sustainable. And besides just products and services which Safaricom develops, we also have programs which are led by our foundations. We have 2 foundations. One of them is the M-Pesa Foundation and Safaricom Foundation. So you find that they also have maternal related initiatives, economic empowerment initiatives. And these initiatives cut across board, and they have both women and men. And basically, we've seen a lot of good results coming out of some of these initiatives. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. It's great. I mean, thank you for the 3 Ps. I think, purpose, you talked about people and profit. And I would say, like you said, it's underpinned by partnerships, right? So it's 4 Ps actually. So thank you for that. So Alexandra, I'd like to move to you next. And we have an audience question for you. The question from the audience is, how would you incorporate gender indicators into the design of social programs? Do you have any best practices that you'd like to share?
Sure. So, I mean, I'm coming from the digital background. I would say that every program or product I work on always has a range of indicators that underpins it, how you define success. And of course, all of them will be gender or sex desegregated. So in terms of the kind of indicators that you could include in your digital product would probably be around women's access and use of ICTs. And there are a number of standardized metrics out there increasingly. For example, the ITU has standardized metrics, GSMA has standardized metrics. Web Foundation and Data2X, their gender portal, has standardized metrics. So I would start by looking at that if you have a digital program. I would also say that any sort of like success metrics you have for your own program, not just around tech, but anything, for example, if like it's improved health outcomes or it's improved learning outcomes, for example, absolutely every single thing should be gender desegregated or sex desegregated. And so there are a lot of standardized metrics you can use out there. In terms of measuring empowerment, if that's what you're interested in, not just around women in tech, but empowerment, female empowerment as a result of your social program, there's a really excellent toolkit that came out a year ago also from JPAL, and it was about how to measure women's empowerment. I don't know if you're nodding your head, Sabina, I don't know if you've seen it. It's really excellent because empowerment is a very loose term. It's difficult to define. So I would really recommend that you check out the JPAL one. On a segue, one of the things I'd just like to add here about collecting sex desegregated data, I'm so thrilled that you asked that question because it is one of the best practices for designing a digital product that either has a gender lens on it or is for women and girls. Historically, it has been very hard to get if it's from a mobile operator. I would also say that Safaricom are leading the way here as well, Benjamin. Safaricom really have done a lot of work around gender segregated data and really understanding their user base in terms of not just user base overall, but like female users versus male users, and not just downloads or access, also about engagement rates. So there's a lot of really interesting work being done in that space, which certainly in my opinion has increased over the last 5 years. And I would also say, again, just to reiterate, Safaricom is really leading the way here. Also, sorry, I just want to pick up on one thing that Benjamin said earlier. Sorry, Amita, but I just want to pick on this. It was really interesting when you said that, you know, the work you're doing, you are looking at people and profits, etc. But you didn't mention it, you're very modest, but one of the amazing things that has come out of Safaricom in the last couple of years was there's one of the first empirical studies that showed that giving women access to mobile money, and M-Pesa in particular, was much more likely to lift women out of poverty compared to men. One of the first studies that actually said that. We've all been talking in theories. Yes, women should have access to tech. Yes, women should have digital products. But to date, it had not been proved until that Safaricom study. So related on that gender indicators sort of thing, I would really check out that particular study on M-Pesa and lifting women in particular out of poverty.
That's brilliant, Alexandra. Thank you so much for such informative answer. I'm so glad I asked you that question. I'd love to move to Quena now. Quena, you of course described the excellent work that SAP is doing in the area of gender and innovation. My question to you is about how can other companies learn from some of the work that you're doing if they're starting out on the issue? How can they start to engage on this issue if they don't know where to begin, or to bring women into their innovation processes?
I'm muted. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. Thanks for the question, Amita. I think it can be quite a bit of a daunting process, right? If you don't know where to begin, you know that there's a challenge ahead of you, but you know, what is step one? And I think this is precisely why as SAP, you know, we've embarked on the collaboration that we have with the Global Compact in terms of, you know, creating a very useful framework that organizations can go to in terms of understanding how to incorporate, for example, the SDGs, but in particular, in this case, gender equality. So the framework really highlights, you know, topics such as, you know, assessing where you are, how you benchmark against your peers, the vision where you should be in terms of, you know, parity with the goals, and then also helping to basically map out the steps in terms of your strategy, your operations, your product development, what you should do at each step in terms of bringing in gender equality into your core business. So I think that is a very good place to start, is to investigate what are the existing frameworks that are out there that me as an organization that I can use in terms of, you know, mapping out the journey. And I think very central to that is understanding where you are at present, right? So conducting your initial, you know, as is scenario measuring where you are in terms of gender equality. And there are some useful tools out there. So I know that Global Compact, for example, has a tool called the Action Manager, which can really help to, you fill in, it's like a survey, fill in a form, answer some key questions, and that can really help you to understand where you stand at present, and then also where you are in terms of the rest of your peers, as well as where to go. And I would encourage that as a first step. I would also encourage, going out there and finding out, what are my peers doing research. Go and speak to your peers, your stakeholders, and also understanding which organizations are out there. I think UN SDG 17 has come up quite a bit in this discussion in terms of partnerships, and finding the right partners that have similar objectives or like-minded can really help to move the needle for organizations that don't necessarily have all the resources, all the capacity, to just find already partners that are kind of moving the needle, and to work together, bring in your collective resources and efforts, to achieve that. And I think that's really one step to go. Certainly for us as SAP, and how we've been able to achieve global impact, and how we see the global impact moving forward, is really through leveraging the partnerships that we have at the moment. And the reality in the world that we live in today is that as Benjamin mentioned, it's all about, it's not only about profit anymore. The idea of purpose beyond profit is very mainstream at the moment. And it's how we do business, and it's how we will continue to do business. And I think all organizations need to challenge themselves, if they want to remain sustainable, is to think about, how do I move to an approach that is beyond profit, but also looks at a purpose-driven agenda in how business is actually done. So not a ticking a box exercise in terms of, classical corporate social responsibility, but really asking ourselves, how do we bring purpose into our DNA, into our day-to-day processes, procedures, culture, strategy, products, in order to remain sustainable going forward.
Great, Quina. That was great. Great oversight of how actually you integrate purpose as a part of the business strategy and operations, not just do woke washing, as some of the people say, but really, integrate purpose in the business. So thank you for that. And with that, I'm sure that listeners have a lot of different questions. In fact, I'm already reading some of these, and I'm going to just direct some of these questions to the panelists. So the first question is to Benjamin. The question is, some young women see agriculture as a dirty job, and that they don't want to do it because it's not very glamorous and fashionable. How did Safaricom get young women excited about agriculture? Yeah, that's the question for you.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that we have to make it resonate with the audience we are targeting at that particular moment. And as it is in Kenya at the moment, besides agriculture being the one which contributes a lot towards the GDP of our country, what we've tried to do is like embedding technology to agriculture makes it quite interesting. I'll give you an example of something we did some years back as an organization. We have what we call phone farmers in Kenya. So you are working in Nairobi, you are a man or a woman, you have a dairy cow in the village. And one of the most interesting bits is like you want to monitor how your cow is doing, how much is it producing, are you able to monitor the amount of milk which is being delivered to the local dairy organization or cooperative there. So by automating that particular process altogether, we made it a little bit juicy and attractive to the young dairy farmers to some extent. So they are able to get information about what has been delivered to the dairy cooperative. They are able to monitor the progress of that particular cow. It's through automation and digitizing agriculture to some extent, which makes it attractive to the young people and to women in particular. So I would say like technology to some extent tries to resolve some of those challenges associated with agriculture. Like you don't necessarily have to physically go to the farm, but you can monitor how your farm is progressing, how your farm manager is going about their day-to-day activities. And those are some of the the new ways technology can bring about a change in a value chain or in an ecosystem. We are not yet there, but we are trying to do it in strides in a small way. Our foundation is also doing some interesting stuff as far as agriculture is concerned. And basically, it's coming up with economic empowerment initiative, which attracts the young generation. And by this, we are looking totally different to the traditional value chains and coming up with new areas whereby you feel that, well, indeed, it is contributing towards my economic empowerment. So there are quite a number of examples which we can give as far as making agriculture attractive to the people who ordinarily would have looked at it as a dirty kind of profession. And not that in the sense that basically what I mean is like automate those processes, make it fun, and bring about efficiency, effectiveness, and transparency as far as the whole value chain is concerned. It's a journey. We've already started the journey, and we are walking the journey together with our subscribers, who majority of them who are involved in agriculture could be women.
Great answer. Thank you so much, Benjamin. So that's great. What I'm going to do is there are other questions that are also coming up from YouTube, but I don't have access to it. So I'm going to request Nkiru to sort of read out some of the questions for the panelists.
Yes, so we have a few questions in YouTube. So the first is directed towards all or any of the panelists. And the question is, are there any examples of digital products that have been adapted or updated to be more inclusive for women as opposed to being designed specifically for women? So if anyone has any examples of that.
I would love to answer this question, but I don't want to be first. Is everyone okay with that? Okay, great. I have lots of examples from my own work, because a lot of the work I have done is not only for women, it's designing so that women are included. So I have a couple, actually. I worked on an edtech platform in Bangladesh a few years ago. It was a very large one. It was, well, Bangladesh is huge, so you have users in the millions. But when we, and I admit this was myself as well, when we dug into the data, because we were collecting sex disaggregated data, like best practices, we found out that only 12% of our users were female. And what was happening was we could see the user journey, and we could see that of those women, they were dropping off very quickly soon after registration. And we found out that was because, and we made a classic mistake here of not talking to women in the first place when we designed the product. I freely admit this, it's one of the best practices now, but at the time we hadn't, it was a few years ago, we didn't actually speak to women to understand what they wanted and needed. So we went back and spoke to female users to understand why they were dropping off like this. And we found out that because it was an IVR, like a voice service, the menu was too complicated for female users. The women who were using it were in rural Bangladesh. They had not really finished primary school. They had very low literacy and very, very low levels of confidence, and didn't actually own their own phones. And so they had very limited access to use phones to become more comfortable. And so when they dialed this service and they were using the IVR service, they found the IVR menu too confusing, and so they didn't complete the registration. Once we found that out, it was easy to fix, and it was easy to fix the registration to make it much simpler for female users and simplify the whole process. And it sounds like and that is a classic mistake. I've seen it again and again and again, but it is relatively easy to fix if you talk to your female users and if you understand your user base from the very beginning, and you can see where males are, where females are, and then talk to them to find out what the issues are. It's easy to fix. So that's one example I have. I have others, but I will let my other panelists speak.
Yeah, I would also like to add on that. And when you look at our core mobile service, that is M-Pesa, we've developed some product of M-Pesa. One of the products is called Mshwari, and there is also another one called KCB. We partnered with Kenya Commercial, KCB M-Pesa. We've partnered with two banks, that is Kenya Commercial Bank and National, it's called what? It's called, they've changed their name recently. Anyway, but previously we used to call them Commercial Bank of Africa. It's a loan product whereby you can borrow some money. Although the product was developed not necessarily for women, but a product to give somebody an opportunity to borrow money for a day, not for a day, within a month, we've realized that in Kenya, we do have what you call mama mboga. Mama mboga are people who sort of like sell vegetables to us. They own some small kiosks. So most of the insights we've gathered is that majority of them would borrow some money, especially women would borrow some money for their kiosks or for their shops in the evening. Very early in the morning, they would go to the market. They will be able to buy groceries. And by the end of the day, once they sell those groceries, they're able to get some money, deposit the money in M-Pesa, and pay those loans. So it's an interesting scenario whereby people are able to leverage on that to economically empower themselves. Yeah, that's just one of an example I could share as far as mobile money is concerned.
I'd also like to share an example from an SAP perspective, where we've worked with a grassroots organization in terms of tackling health issues of vulnerable women within rural areas where there's very limited infrastructure and reach. So tackling the issue of healthcare. Particularly in childbirth, and as well as coupling that with, tackling and unveiling, removing the silence around gender-based violence. So basically, we've partnered with an organization called Women at Risk International Foundation. This is in rural Nigeria, where they have basically a community-based organization where they have outreach of community workers that go in and help with birth. And what we've done is leveraged an SAP technology in terms of our mobile technology. The technology is basically called SAP People Connect 365 mobile services. And essentially what we used that was as an emergency response service for field workers that are going out into the field to fix an issue for a customer, to also in terms of emergency services for health. And we've taken that platform and leveraged it here within this community to basically work with the community organizers that are facilitating births in those rural environments, to provide kind of a back-to-back feedback mechanism in terms of how to manage that birthing process, and coupling that with as well providing a feedback mechanism where those workers are also working with gender-based violence, using that as a platform to highlight gender-based violence, and also to work with those women in those communities to find solutions. So that's really an example of how we've taken a commercial product and applied it differently, where it benefits women in rural areas where there's very much limited reach for infrastructure.
So the next question is for Sabina and Benjamin, in regards to, you both discussed the gender gap in terms of mobile connectivity. And the question is, what can business do specifically to address this issue, get more and better mobile penetration across women when so many of the issues seem to be linked to cultural and social barriers?
Great, thank you, Nkiru. Benjamin, if it's okay, I'll just quickly respond to a couple of things. Yeah. First, I also wanted to just address the question about indicators in agriculture really quickly. I think, we are still quite far behind in terms of collecting enough gender disaggregated data. There's, for example, both in the technology sector and in the sectors that I work in, which is, labor market statistics, we still are pretty far behind in terms of getting labor market statistics, productivity statistics, for example, or, a lot of companies will collect data on how many workers they have, but not exactly how many female and male workers they have, but not exactly beyond leadership positions, what other positions are the women in? And so this leads to really a lack of information in terms of the kinds of mobility that women have access to, we find. So I just wanted to emphasize, we know, for example, in the technology sector that there's large social media messaging apps that still don't ask you what sex you are when you actually download the app or sign up for their services. And so that actually creates pretty large gaps in terms of our understanding about how, beyond just basic penetration numbers, how women are actually downloading apps, using apps, and then in the labor market, there's sort of a range of statistics which are lacking in terms of gender disaggregation. So that's one point. The second point on the agriculture question. So, I think we have to recognize that actually women are pretty highly represented in agricultural employment. In fact, we find that there's usually more women than men in agriculture, but a lot of women are doing work that is sort of, unpaid, or working on family farms. And so I think it's really important to actually recognize that women are, excuse me one second, women are actually represented in the agricultural sector. And I think the important thing here is to recognize that agriculture as a whole is a sector that is it often has a high degree of informal employment and employment that can be of lower quality. And that is also sometimes synonymous with the kinds of jobs that women are relegated to. So when we talk about improving, and getting women, improving women's employment in agriculture and getting women more excited about agriculture, I think we need to talk about improving the productivity and the conditions of the agricultural sector as a whole, making sure that women actually get paid fair remuneration in the sector, making sure that they actually get paid for the work that they do, sometimes on family farms and so on. Because unless women are enjoying equal rights and equal benefits of participating in the agricultural sector, can you really blame them if they drop out? So we need to make sure that there's actually gender parity in terms of good working conditions in the agricultural sector before we can really get women excited about it. And then I'm sorry, I forgot in Kuru, I forgot what the other question was. If you don't mind.
So the question was about mobile penetration, low levels of mobile penetration for women. And what can business do when so much of it seems to be linked to cultural and social barriers that keep women from mobile technology?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's why the kind of work that Alexandra is talking about and doing is so important, because I think that while we all as a society have to work towards addressing the mindset gaps and kind of making sure that women can access technology, having applications, having technological interfaces that are more focused on the kinds of usage and the kinds of issues that women deal with will enhance that penetration. So, there's no easy answer to this. We do have to address the mindsets question. But I think thinking through, making sure that whenever we deploy technology, that there is a human interface, ensuring that the kinds of whether it's ed tech apps or other apps are more focused on the user experience and the usability for women, I think that will all enhance penetration.
Sure, and maybe to respond to that from context of Safaricom, there are a number of issues which sort of like make it a little bit difficult, and one of them is cost and literacy levels of the women we are serving. But wearing a different lens altogether, I would want to look at it in two angles. One of the angle is positivity, a positive one in the sense that most of our women are sort of like domiciled in communal setup, and we've seen some solutions which are developed like information dissemination solutions. You find that an homestead has somebody who is literate, and the people we want to reach out maybe, or the intended person we want to reach out might not be literate. So what happens is like when we disseminate that kind of information, it reaches one person, but there is a ripple effect associated with that particular message. since the recipient of that message has to translate it to another person, it forms a wider chain of people who are going to receive that particular information. So in a positive way, you end up reaching quite a number of people by sharing one particular phone in a setup whereby the phone is just for that particular home stand. But there are some initiatives which are being sort of like, or rather, which are on the pipeline as far as Safaricom is concerned, in terms of like ensuring that people are able to buy devices or handsets in a staggered manner, whereby you acquire a device and then you can pay it over time. That will be able to address the challenge of cost, but to some extent, it might not be able to address the literacy issue. So the only bit which will be addressed with that particular approach could be the ownership sort of like a challenge, and many people will be able to have access to those devices which they can pay over time. It's still work in progress, but for now, the solutions we've been developing, we always wear that lens that as much as we are just intending to reach a mother or a farmer, this farmer might also be able to spread the message to a number of other people. The person who is translating that information will also learn something which they can apply in their day-to-day activities. So it's still a tall order. Our desire is to ensure that or rather, our desire would be like as many people have access to those particular devices. But in a small way, those are some of the initiatives which might make a difference and ensure that as many women are able to have access to a device which they can use for their day-to-day activities.
This is Alex. May I just add a little bit to what Sabina and Benjamin said? Like really excellent points, and I 100% agree with both of what both of you said. I think there are two different ways to look at this. You can look at the policy side, and again, businesses may not get involved in the policy side too much, but you know, Benjamin mentioned cost and affordability. There is a lot of work being done on the policy side around like lowering taxes, for example, on like handsets and smartphones, that sort of thing, because women are a lot more price sensitive. There's a lot of work being done in the space around collecting data. And you know, Sabina mentioned this earlier about the lack of sex desegregated, gender desegregated data. This has changed in the last few years, but there's still not much at all. And so the more the community kind of like collects this data and like shares this data, the more we're able to identify the gaps, so we're able to address it. So there's one thing on the policy side, and then just building again on what Benjamin and Sabina said about actually when you have the digital products, how you get women on the platform, so to speak. I just wanted to add that like marketing and promotion to women is really, really important. So if you have like a health service, for example, if you send out SMS blasts, which is quite traditional, a lot of women have low levels of literacy, as Benjamin mentioned. So ways to get around this is going to health centers, going to places where women actually are and promoting it through those sort of channels and women's groups and that sort of stuff. And another thing maybe to think about is pricing and bundling of your service. Women are much more price sensitive. So there's been some amazing work done, I think in Iraq and possibly Turkey, about specialized tariffs. Oh, in India as well. India, Telenor did some amazing stuff on specialized tariffs and specialized bundled aimed particularly at women, and aimed particularly in India at men as the gatekeepers of women's access, so like a dual SIM package. So there's lots of really innovative stuff that Benjamin and Sabina mentioned. I think just to add to those things, there's lots of exciting stuff happening. It's just making sure you put a gender lens on all of those sort of things.
Great, thank you. And I think we have time for one final question. And the question is to all panelists. There have been recent examples of technologies like blockchain being used to address corruption by taking the human arm out of certain processes. Could we see similar types of uses to address subconscious gender bias, where technology is used to replace a human hand and therefore remove unconscious bias?
Well,
Okay, I'll go. Oh, okay.
no, go ahead, go in.
I'll be quick. I'll be very quick. I think definitely there is an opportunity there, but I think what we need to be cognizant of are the teams that are building this technology. So for instance, if you look at artificial intelligence, you know, they've been applications of that in terms of financial services, where, you know, artificial intelligence is used to underscore or decide on the line of credit that a particular applicant can get. And there have been reports, for example, of an organization in the US where a couple applied for the same product. This is a couple that lives in the same household, has the same financial profile, basically contributing equally to the household in terms of what they bring to the home, but also in terms of what their businesses are running. And the man in the relationship got a higher line of credit versus the female. And for me, that speaks to the unconscious biases that are built into the artificial intelligence. So I think there's definitely an opportunity to remove those biases, but we have to be cognizant of the fact that we need the right diversity in the teams in order to already identify and build in the removal of those biases within the technology. Otherwise, we can see a widening gap in terms of biases if we don't remain cognizant of the fact that, you know, the biases need to be built into the AI or the technology that's being leveraged. Yeah.
I'll just add really quickly to that. That was exactly one of the points that I was also going to make. You know, my personal view, I was in Davos earlier this year at a blockchain for development talk, and you know, I took it upon myself to be a representative of the global South in some ways in that conversation, and underscore the fact that we are still some time away from, you know, women having equal access to technology, women having the requisite levels of education and digital skills. And so the idea that, you know, we can just have women sort of comprehend and understand and use blockchain for development kind of technology that will all of a sudden make financial transactions extremely transparent in principle sounds good, but I think we're still some ways away from that in my view. You know, a lot of women don't even have bank accounts. So, you know, what are we exactly talking about here? And I think the one thing that I would caution you know, to those of us that are working on development and gender parity in development and the role of technology in trying to either promote or just allow, you know, enable equal access for women, is this idea that we have to start where things really are, as opposed to sort of starting where we think things should be. And the reality is that, you know, we still have a lot of work to do before we can fully harness things like blockchain for the purpose of financial transactions for women, or broader purposes in terms of blockchain for development, particularly looking at gender parity and inclusiveness. That's my view. And those, you know, there's a lot of tech, much more experience in tech. I study the nexus of women in tech, but you all are much more experienced practitioners. So feel free to disagree, and I you know, look forward to learning if that's the case. But that's, I just wanted to kind of state what we find in terms of our research. Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe from where I sit, for us, technology is more of an enabler, and we try to make it just as we believe in, as simple as possible. So we use different technologies to try and address pressing needs within the society or our subscribers in general. So we combine a number of technological, maybe or rather approaches in terms of addressing some of those issues, be it in ensuring that women are bankable and those kind of stuff. So all I would say is that there are quite a number of technologies which will be talked about out there, but we do more of, we usually try to ensure that whatever technology we are checking out there, or rather whatever solution we are coming up with, is a technology which will be embraced by the masses who form the call, or rather they are the biggest number as far as our subscribers are concerned. But in principle, we embrace new technologies, and we always find ways of embedding them in our solutions to ensure that ultimately we are able to solve a certain pressing need within the society in a sustainable way.
Great. And Kiru, shall I pick up from where you left off? Great. So, by the way, thank you so much. It's been a very rich and insightful discussion and really great inputs. But unfortunately, we could talk for another couple of hours, but we've got to really wrap up now because we're sort of coming to the end of time. So what I'd really like panelists to do is to the session topic today was how businesses can promote women's participation in the innovation life cycle and how innovators can ensure they are incorporating gender considerations into their innovations. You've given us a lot of food for thought, but if you had one sort of wrap up message for the listeners as to the kind of action that they can take forward from what you've just discussed, or any message that you'd like to leave with us. I'd just like you to sort of go around the panelists and spend 1 minute for your wrap-up messages. So Sabina, if I just start with you.
Sure. Thank you very much for an excellent panel. I learned a lot myself too. I would just like to emphasize, there's a lot of people that are trying to find, and including on this panel, technology-oriented solutions. There's a lot of work that's happening in terms of female economic empowerment. I would just say that that as we do these things that are extremely important, we cannot forget the longer term investments in trying to instigate more community, societal change, and mindset change. And I think that's a message that isn't disseminated enough because it's not easy to do. And so a lot, whether we're talking about the SDGs, they talk more about economic empowerment, right? I understand we get into a lot of sovereignty and cultural sovereignty issues, but it's extremely important that we discuss mindset change and underscore that as we do these other things, that we need to have interventions that are actually fundamentally addressing communities and families and societal norms and gender normative structures. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabina. Benjamin, your message to the audience.
Basically, what I would say is thank you so much for having us in this particular panel. And I was just making fun of my colleague that I'm the only man in the panel, and she told me that it's he for she, and I'm proud to be a part of it. And as Safaricom, actually, we believe that there is power in diversity, and that a diverse and inclusive workforce is empowered workforce, and it is better posted to serve. We believe in serving our subscribers, and as an organization, we are committed to this particular journey because we believe we can be there for our subscribers and Kenyans in general. And the only way to do that is leveraging on the assets of our organization, or rather Safaricom in general, be it the technology, be it the brand assets. And we are looking forward to developing solutions which not only serve our customers, but also empower our customers, be they women and men. Thank you so much for having us in this particular panel.
Thank you so much, Benjamin, and really valuable inputs. Alexandra, if I could ask you to share your message.
Sure. Well, first of all, just to repeat what others have said, thank you so much for having me. It's been really lovely to talk about this stuff for much longer than most people actually let me talk about it. So it's wonderful. I just want to finish with, I think I come from a slightly different angle compared to other people when I work particularly in women and girls as users of technology. And so it's not a topic I think we've touched on much here, but I would just say to people watching the webinar, as I understand a lot of people are creating innovative products and creating digital products. So I would say that there's loads of opportunities to put in gender lens, and there's lots of gender entry points at all stages of the innovation cycle. I do have a lot of resources on these, and I'm very happy to share them if anyone would like to reach out to know specifically, like, what are the best practices for marketing for women, or what's the best practices for designing for a female user experience. So if anyone is interested in that sort of stuff, please do feel free to reach out to me. I'm very happy to share stuff. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Alexandra. Definitely take you up on that. I am going to. Koena, over to you for your message.
Thank you so much, Amita, and thank you to the panel and everyone who was listening. It was really great conversation. I've also have a few takeaways that I will go and think about. But just as a final message, I will just reiterate on SAP's commitment that we have in terms of driving overall the UN SDGs, as well as our commitment with the Global Compact and Accenture on the SDG ambition. That is a practical framework that organizations can take and utilize in their day-to-day in terms of moving forward on the SDGs, and of course, like I mentioned, gender equality is very much central to that, because we do believe that by achieving that goal, we touch on so many of the other goals. There really is a ripple effect. And for us, it's about, going on this journey, not only with our partners and customers, but taking basically organizations all around the world on the journey of incorporating SDG into your day-to-day, incorporating gender equality into your DNA, and, really giving a useful framework to do that. So what I would encourage is, for organizations to go and look at these resources that are available. There are more, even beyond the commitment that we've made in terms of making this a reality for organizations. And then also, of course, emphasizing the role of partnerships in terms of really moving the needle, moving far and fast together in terms of closing the gaps for gender equality.
Thank you so much, Krena. Thank you so much for making the point about far and fast. And I really liked what you said about the ripple effect. A recent paper by UN Women showed that gender equality is critical to us achieving and accelerating progress on sustainable development goals, whether it's food security, whether it's health, whether it's climate change. And so, but we really, in order to make it happen, we need everyone to play their part. Our panelists and companies certainly are doing that. I hope the listeners today are inspired to find out more and to do more and take action. So with that, thank you very much to all the panelists as well as the listeners from my side. And I'm going to pass on to Nkiru to close the call.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mita, for moderating what was a great session. And thank you again to all of the panelists, as well as everyone in the audience listening, both on Zoom and on YouTube. Thank you for your participation and your great questions too. Just a few things I want to highlight. We will have this recording up available for everyone. We'll have it on the YSIP Hub, where you can find this recording in the next couple of days, as well as previous sessions. And then we also have an upcoming workshop in this series focused on data and human rights. And this will be taking place in May 2020. So we'll have more details as to the date and time for that session, as well as speakers coming up for you soon. So thank you again for joining. A great session, really. Big thanks to the speakers and to everyone involved. And so with that, we'll bid you adieu and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, Nkiru.
Bye.
Bye.